right, welcome everyone to another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a close look at, well, ourselves. Human factors in glider flying. You guys sent in a ton of resources, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It is. So the goal here is to pull out what we really need to know. The stuff that can actually make a difference when we're up in the air. The stuff that will keep us safer and make us better, more aware glider pilots.
I think one of the things that struck me right away looking at all this is how many different areas of expertise feed into this. It's not just about aviation.
Oh, totally.
It's about how our brains work, cognitive science and psychology, and even how we learn, educational psychology, and then you got the engineering side, safety engineering, and then the medical science side.
It's huge.
It's a lot, yeah.
It really shows that this whole human factors thing, it's not just about physically flying the glider. It's about, well, us. It's about how we function as people.
Exactly.
Which I guess makes sense, right? I mean, we're the ones making the decisions up there. So where we're going to go with this deep dive is looking at pilot attitudes, right? The good and the bad ones. And then, of course, pilot error, because we all make mistakes. Then we'll get into some of the physiological stuff, things that can affect us physically and mentally when we're flying, like fatigue or hypoxia.
Yeah, those are big ones.
For sure. And we'll also cover glider and systems management, because a well-maintained glider is a safer glider. And finally, we'll talk about decision-making, because at the end of the day, making good decisions is what keeps us safe.
Absolutely. And just a heads up, we'll be touching on some concepts that you might recognize from the FAA Risk Management Handbook and the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge.
That stuff, so you know we're on the right track. Okay, so first up, attitudes.
All right, so hazardous attitudes. These are the attitudes that can really get us into trouble. They lead to risky behaviors, like complacency, indiscipline, and overconfidence. Those are the big three.
Yeah, complacency, it's that sneaky feeling like, oh, I've done this a million times before. I can skip the checklist today. Or this landing is easy. I can relax a little. But, even at a familiar site, wind conditions can change. Launch procedures can change.
Right. And the resources really stressed, actively fighting complacency, actually setting aside time for a thorough pre-flight every single time, really looking at the risks for each flight, what's different today, and even pushing yourself to fly your best, even on those easy flights.
Not cutting corners.
Exactly.
Okay, then there's indiscipline, which I guess simply put is not following the rules.
Yeah, and the regs, they set a minimum standard, but good pilots, they often set stricter personal minimums, right, for visibility or wind. And the key here, it's adjusting those minimums based on solid reasoning, like your training or your current skill level.
It can be tough, right? You really want to fly, but conditions are borderline.
Absolutely. And it's even more important to stick to those stricter minimums when you're not feeling 100% or haven't flown in a while.
You mentioned training, and that makes me think sometimes, as pilots get more experience, they think they found a better way to do something, a shortcut.
Yeah.
And, sometimes maybe they have. But I think it's so important to really analyze those shortcuts. Are they truly safe, or are they in line with best practices?
Right, because those standardized procedures, they're usually there for a reason.
They've been developed and tested and refined to make things as safe as possible.
Exactly. And if anyone's looking for a structured approach to this whole discipline thing, the FAA Risk Management Handbook's got some great info on setting personal minimums and doing pre-flight safety analysis.
Good resource. Okay, so last of these, hazardous attitudes, overconfidence. I mean, some confidence is good, right?
Yeah, sure. Realistic confidence, it comes from training, practice, knowing your stuff, and sticking to those procedures. But overconfidence, that's when you start getting a little too comfortable. You think you can handle anything. And that comes from not really understanding your limitations or the glider's limitations or even the conditions you're flying in.
It's easy to get caught up in that, right? Especially, I think, when you've had a few good flights, maybe pushed the limits a bit and gotten away with it.
Yeah, but that could be a slippery slope.
It is. So things to watch out for. Flying a glider you're not really checked out in, or flying into unfamiliar airspace when you're not really prepared, that's when that overconfidence can bite you.
Yeah, and for those of us who don't fly as often, those flight reviews and currency requirements, those are there for a reason. Keep those skills sharp.
All right, so moving on, let's talk about something we all do. Make mistakes, pilot error. No one's perfect.
Nope, and the sources are very clear on this. We all make mistakes, and we all have gaps in our knowledge.
And that's why we train, right? Why we have those assessments, exams, checks, critiques, and, honest self-assessment. All that stuff helps us pinpoint where we need to improve.
It's like shining a light on those weaknesses.
Exactly. So the sources break down these errors into a few types. First, unintentional errors. It's basically when you don't do what you intended to do or you don't do it well.
Like a slip-up, little fumble.
Right, like you meant to make a smooth landing, but you over-controlled a bit in a gust.
Happens to the best of us. Okay, then you got mistakes. These are a bit more, well, they usually come from bad judgment, maybe poor reasoning, not enough knowledge. Like that example in the text, the ridge soaring pilot, they get caught in some strong sink on the downwind side of the ridge because they didn't understand how the airflow works there.
That's a classic example.
It is. And then the last type, intentional errors. This is when a pilot, they knowingly do something wrong, they deviate from procedures or regs, they cut corners.
That's a big red flag.
It is. It shows a lack of respect for safety. If you catch yourself doing that, it's time for some serious self-reflection. Maybe talk to an instructor, a mentor, and definitely stay on the ground until you figure it out.
Safety first. Okay, now let's shift gears a bit and talk about physiology, our bodies and how they function in flight. Fatigue, it's something we all experience, but in the air, it can be really dangerous.
Absolutely. Fatigue, it affects everything. Your thinking, your decision-making, reaction time, coordination. It makes you slower, weaker, even affects your balance. And you just can't focus as well. And it's not just physical fatigue, emotional, mental fatigue, they take a toll too.
And the things that cause fatigue, it's a pretty long list. Lack of sleep, obviously. Stress, overwork, it all adds up. And there are some really specific signs of fatigue that are mentioned in Figure 13-2, like if your sleep isn't refreshing, if you have headaches, trouble concentrating, feeling irritable, those are all signs that you might be fatigued.
And then there's this whole thing about circadian rhythms, those internal clocks our bodies run on. Figure 13-3 shows how our performance naturally goes up and down throughout the day.
Right, like we're not meant to be at our peak at 3 a.m.
Exactly. And if you're flying when your body's naturally in a down cycle, you might not even realize how impaired you are. Especially dangerous when you're flying solo because there's no one else to spot the signs.
So the big takeaway here is you got to get enough sleep. Good quality sleep consistently. Track your sleep, pay attention to how you feel, and while caffeine or those stay-awake pills might help in a pinch, they're not a long-term solution. They can actually make fatigue worse later on.
Exactly. And if you're dealing with chronic fatigue, like it's not going away, even with enough rest, stop flying. Talk to a doctor. Figure out what's going on.
Your health comes first. Okay, next up we have hyperventilation. Basically breathing too fast, too deep.
Yeah, and what happens is you get rid of too much carbon dioxide, which throws off the balance in your blood. And that can cause all sorts of problems. Stress, fright, pain, even turbulence or strong sink, those can all trigger it. And at high altitudes, you naturally breathe faster because there's less oxygen.
Figure 13-4 lists a bunch of symptoms. Headache, slow reaction time, impaired judgment, even euphoria, which is kind of strange, and visual problems, tingling. So, if you're suddenly in some strong lift and you're feeling overwhelmed, could that fast breathing actually make your decision-making worse?
It could, yeah. The good news is treating it's pretty simple. Slow down your breathing, take deep breaths, and even talking out loud can help get those carbon dioxide levels back to normal. You usually recover pretty quickly. But, in rare cases, if you ignore it, it can lead to you passing out. So definitely take it seriously.
Now let's talk about hypoxia, which is, well, basically not getting enough oxygen, especially to your brain. And this is a big one for glider pilots because we often fly at higher altitude.
Yeah, and it can happen in a few different ways. Hypoxic hypoxia, that's the classic one. Not enough oxygen in the air because you're up high. Even though the percentage of oxygen in the air stays the same, the pressure changes so you're not getting as much with each breath. It's like trying to breathe through a straw.
Interesting analogy.
Then you have hypemic hypoxia, where your blood can't carry enough oxygen. This could be from bleeding or anemia or even carbon monoxide poisoning. And the sources even mention blood donation. It takes a while for your hemoglobin levels to get back to normal after you donate, and that can affect how much oxygen your blood carries. So something to keep in mind.
Makes sense. So what was that next one?
Stagnant hypoxia. That's when your blood's got enough oxygen, but it's not getting to where it needs to go. Like your arm falling asleep, but on a larger scale. This can happen from shock, heart problems, G-forces, even extreme cold.
Got it. And the last one?
Hystoxic hypoxia. This is when your cells can't use the oxygen that's delivered. Alcohol, drugs, poisons, those can all cause this.
So symptoms of hypoxia, it sounds like it can be a lot of different things.
It can be, yeah. Blue fingernails and lips, headaches, slow reaction time, bad judgment, even feeling really happy when you shouldn't be. And then blurry vision, drowsiness, lightheadedness, tingling. It's a long list.
And the problem is, it can trick you into feeling like you're fine when you're actually not.
Exactly. That's what makes it so dangerous.
So treatment, getting more oxygen, descending to a lower altitude using supplemental oxygen. And figure 13-5, this shows time of useful consciousness, which is basically how much time you have at a certain altitude before you can't think straight anymore. And you can see above 10,000 feet, that time drops off quickly.
Yeah, above 18,000 feet, you might only have a few minutes.
That's scary.
It is. And everyone experiences hypoxia differently, so the sources really recommend trying it out in a controlled environment like an altitude chamber. You can find those at places like AMI, the FAA's Civil Aerospace Medical Institute, or some military bases. That way you know how it affects you personally.
Okay, so moving on. Something a little less serious, but still annoying. Ear discomfort. You know, that pressure you feel during takeoff and landing?
Yeah, that's because the pressure inside your middle ear doesn't always match the pressure outside. So during climb, the pressure inside your ear is higher, and your eardrum bulges out. You might hear a pop as the pressure equalizes.
And during descent, it's the opposite. The pressure outside is higher, pushing your eardrum in. And if you have a cold or allergies, it can be really tough to equalize.
Right. So things that can help. Chewing gum, hard candy, swallowing, those can help open the eustachian tube. And if that doesn't work, there's the Valsalva maneuver. Pinch your nose, close your mouth, and gently try to blow air out your nose. That increases the pressure in your ear and can force the tube open.
Good tips. Now, for those of us who also like to scuba dive, there's something important to remember. The bends.
Yeah, decompression sickness. When you're scuba diving, your body absorbs more nitrogen because of the pressure. Then when you go up at altitude, that nitrogen can form bubbles in your body. And that can cause all sorts of problems.
Painful problems.
Yeah, and it can be really serious. So the AM, the Aeronautical Information Manual, it says you got to wait at least 12 hours after a no decompression dive before you fly, and 24 hours after a dive that required decompression stops.
Better safe than sorry.
Absolutely.
Okay, another thing that can mess with us in the air is spatial disorientation.
So most glider pilots, especially those who are learning, they fly using basic instruments, and they try to avoid situations where visibility's bad or the horizon's hard to see, like in figure 13-7.
Right, when you can't tell which way is up.
Exactly. Those situations can really mess with your senses and make you lose control of the glider. And of course, if you're flying a power glider at night or in instrument conditions, that's a whole different ballgame. You need specific training and ratings for that.
Now let's talk about something that might seem simple but can sneak up on you, especially during those long flights. Dehydration.
Long flights, hot weather, high altitude, all that can make you lose fluids more quickly. Figure 13-8 goes into detail about how that happens. And the symptoms can be subtle at first, just feeling tired, but then you can get dizzy, weak, nauseous, tingly, cramps, and of course, thirsty.
So the solution, drink water. Always have water with you on every flight, no matter how short you think it'll be.
And a hat helps too to keep the sun off you.
Just make sure it doesn't block your view. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have cold weather, something to be aware of, especially for those high-altitude wave flights.
Yeah, even if it's mild on the ground, it can get really cold up high, like -30, -60 Celsius. And the sun can fool you. You know, it feels warm on your face, but your legs and feet can be freezing. So layers, lots of layers. Loose-fitting clothes, wool gloves or mittens, warm socks, insulated boots.
And the sources mentioned electrically heated clothing, which I guess is a thing now?
Yeah, pretty cool technology for those who fly in cold weather a lot.
And then there's condensation and frost, which can form on the canopy when it's cold. You can try wiping it off or use the vents to clear it, but that'll make the cabin colder. And remember, you dehydrate faster in cold, dry air, so even if you don't feel thirsty, keep drinking water. Go to the bathroom before you take off, and if it's a long flight, consider a relief system.
All right, moving inside the glider now, let's talk about cabin management and equipment. Before every flight, brief your passengers on safety belts, harnesses, and emergency procedures.
Good point. And make sure any trim ballast is secured and everything else you have in the cockpit, charts, tablets, navigation stuff, it's all stowed away properly but accessible if you need it.
Right. And speaking of important equipment, the parachute. A good reminder, nylon parachutes have to be repacked by a certified rigger every 180 days.
And the repack date should be on a peg right on the harness. That's in the regs, 14 CFR 91.307.
Now, for high-altitude soaring, supplemental oxygen is a must-have. Thermal lift can get you to 16,000, 18,000 feet, and in wave, you can go way higher, over 30,000.
And up that high, you're just not getting enough oxygen with each breath. You might start breathing faster to compensate, but that can lead to hyperventilation, which we talked about earlier. So 14 CFR 91.211, that lays out the rules for when you need to use supplemental oxygen.
Before you use any oxygen system, you got to do a thorough check. We use the price checklist, pressure, regulator, indicator, connections, and emergency. make sure everything's working right.
Okay, and there are two main types of oxygen systems used in gliders. First, the continuous flow system. It uses a high-pressure cylinder and a regulator to deliver a constant flow of oxygen, either through a mask or a nasal cannula. Some have manual controls, some are automatic and adjust the flow based on altitude.
Then you have the electronic pulse demand oxygen system, EDS. It's more efficient because it only gives you oxygen when you inhale.
So it saves oxygen.
Yeah, exactly. And it's lighter, smaller, perfect for gliders. A lot of them adjust automatically based on altitude, up to about 32,000 feet. And above that, they usually switch to a 100% pulse demand mode.
So more efficient, lighter, automatic, and maybe even helps prevent hyperventilation.
That's the idea.
Sounds like a good system. And one crucial thing to remember, always use aviators oxygen. It's the green bottle. Never use medical oxygen. It has moisture in it that can freeze and damage your equipment.
All right, let's move on to something really important. Risk management. This is all about identifying the things that could go wrong, figuring out how likely they are to happen and how bad they would be if they did, and then figuring out how to reduce those risks to an acceptable level.
So what kind of hazards are we talking about?
Well, it could be a lot of things. You, the pilot, your condition, your skills, the glider, any problems with the aircraft or equipment, the environment, weather, terrain, other traffic, and even external pressures, like feeling like you have to complete a flight even though maybe you shouldn't.
Like that pressure to get back before sunset or to impress someone?
Exactly. So we use the PAVE checklist to help us remember all that. Pilot, aircraft, environment, external pressures.
Good mnemonic. So how do we actually assess the risk?
We look at the severity, how bad would it be if this happened, and the likelihood, how likely is it to happen. And then we think about ways to mitigate that risk, to make it less likely or less severe, like that example they gave, practicing for a tow rope break. If you train for it, you're more likely to handle it safely if it happens.
Right. So if the overall risk is too high, you might delay the flight, wait for better conditions, or even cancel it altogether.
Absolutely. And while we're focusing on individual risk management, it's worth mentioning that there are also safety management systems, SMS, which is a more organizational approach. The FAA Risk Management Handbook goes into more detail about that.
So building on risk management is aeronautical decision-making, ADM. We're always making decisions before and during flight, and a lot of those decisions involve managing risk.
Yeah, and a good tool for this is the Flight Risk Assessment Tool, FRAT. The FAA Risk Management Handbook has some examples and guidance on how to use them.
Now, one thing we always have to remember is that the FAA regulations, those minimums they set, those are just the bare minimum. They don't take into account your personal skills, experience, or how you're feeling on that particular day.
That's why it's really important to set your own personal minimums. What are your limits for weather, for your glider's condition, for your own fitness to fly? And stick to those minimums.
And the FAA Risk Management Handbook has some great advice on how to do that. So in-flight ADM, it's not a one-time thing. It's a constant process.
Yeah, you're always perceiving hazards, figuring out what to do, and then doing it. And this goes on from the moment you start planning the flight all the way through to your post-flight debriefing.
Now, it's a bit sobering, but human factors are still a big cause of accidents. And often, it's not one big mistake. It's a chain of smaller events, the error chain.
Break one link in that chain, and you might prevent the accident.
So what are some examples of these bad decisions that can lead to accidents?
Well, continuing a flight when you know there's a slow oxygen leak, or taking off when the forecast predicts strong winds later, or flying with low batteries.
In each case, there was a safer option, right? Address the leak, wait for better weather, charge the batteries, simple things that can make a big difference.
Exactly.
Now, if you want to learn more about ADM, Advisory Circular 6022 is a good resource. It talks about risk assessment and attitude modification, how our own biases can affect our decisions. And student pilots, it's really good to find instructors who incorporate ADM training into their lessons.
And the FAA Risk Management Handbook, that's always a great reference for this stuff.
Finally, we can learn a lot by studying past accidents. The NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, they investigate all reportable accidents, including glider accidents, and they put those reports online on their website, ntsb.gov.
You can search for glider on their site and find all sorts of details about what happened. It really drives home this idea of the error chain.
Yeah, and Figure 1313 in our resources, it summarizes some recent glider accidents. It shows the types of accidents, the probable causes, stalls, loss of control, off-airport landings, mid-air collisions, equipment problems. It's pretty eye-opening.
And so many of these accidents could have been avoided if different choices were made along the way. It shows how important it is to understand these human factors and manage risk effectively.
So, wrapping up, we covered a lot today. Hazardous attitudes, pilot error, physiology, cabin management, oxygen systems, risk management, decision-making, and learning from accidents.
And the big takeaway is glider flying has inherent risks, but by understanding and applying these human factors principles, we can make it a lot safer.
So one last thought for you. Based on everything we discussed today, what changes could you make to your own approach to safety and decision making? Maybe it's time to revisit your personal minimums or take another look at your pre-flight routine. Fly safe out there.
Fly safe.